Story 1. I used to work in the customer retention department of an internet service provider back in the day. While many people called genuinely wanting to cancel their phone service, just as many knew that the retention department was more than that. The company, which we'll call Red Phone, had two different departments for retention. I worked in the first retention team, where we mostly fixed billing issues and offered small discounts or slightly cheaper phones to customers who said they wanted to leave. The second retention team was for customers who were in the process of transferring their numbers to another provider. The most significant offer they could make was a 50% discount for a couple of years, along with a decent phone for free. This happened roughly 10, maybe 12 years ago when roaming charges were shockingly high. Let me introduce you to the executive. I got his call, went through my usual introduction, and immediately realized this guy was one of the most entitled people I had ever dealt with. He claimed to be a very important executive who traveled a lot for work, but he was furious about his bill, which he called ridiculous, and demanded that I resolve it, or he would cancel his service. I muted the call so he couldn't hear me, but I could still hear him. While I checked his account, I overheard him boasting to his girlfriend about how he was going to get the bill credited because he knew how to manipulate the system. While he was being incredibly rude, he wasn't entirely wrong. This guy was a master at playing Red Phone's system. He had the highest phone plan the company offered, which cost around €90 at the time for a single line, but he only paid €30 per month because he had discounts from both retention departments stacked on top of each other. His plan allowed him to get what was, at that time, a very expensive phone for nearly nothing through the second retention team. He had been given top-tier customer status and access to a priority customer service line usually reserved for customers averaging a €300 monthly bill. Despite only paying €30 on average, he had complained about poor customer service in the past, which had likely contributed to his preferential treatment. He wasn't wrong about his bill being outrageous either. He had visited several countries within the European Union and had racked up a €600 bill. He called customer service and claimed he didn't know roaming was so expensive, stating that no one had warned him when he mentioned he would be traveling abroad. The company had a policy that, for a first-time complaint, especially if the customer hadn't been informed about extra charges, we could issue a refund. The representative explained the roaming costs to him and refunded all of his roaming charges, leaving him with a €30 bill. The second month rolled around, and he continued to use his phone overseas, this time accumulating a €500 bill. He called customer service again, but this time they informed him that they couldn't issue another refund. He then said he wanted to cancel his account and was transferred to me. He demanded that we credit his roaming charges again, arguing that if we could do it once, we could do it again. He also pointed out that roaming prices were excessive, and to be fair, he wasn't wrong about that either. I explained that I couldn't issue another refund, so he asked me to open a claim and escalate the issue. I refused because there was no higher authority to escalate it to, and he wasn't going to get the charges credited. He insisted he wouldn't hang up until I escalated the issue, claiming he was too busy to waste time on this call and that he would charge the company for his time if it dragged on much longer. By this point, I had been working there long enough to know that if a customer was polite or even just reasonable, I would go out of my way to help them. But if they were rude, sorry, no luck. I didn't have to deal with them. This guy, though, had crossed the line from being rude to being absolutely insufferable, and I was fed up. I couldn't be rude in return, but he had pushed things too far, and I was about to make sure he learned his lesson. I told him that since he was so insistent, I would open a claim to review his €500 bill, and I muted him while I processed the request. Once again, I could hear him bragging to his girlfriend about how smart he was and how he was going to get the charges refunded. Meanwhile, I copied and pasted the notes from the previous month's claim, where the representative had clearly documented. The customer has been informed about roaming charges in all the countries he mentioned he might visit with a list of European countries. Additionally, the discounts he had managed to stack. That was never supposed to happen. He had likely called the first retention team multiple times until he found a new employee who didn't know better and applied another discount on top of the one he got from the second team. He hadn't read the terms and conditions of his account, but I had. Attempting to defraud the company was grounds for termination of service. I opened the claim, flagged down my supervisor, and asked her to include it in the daily report sent to headquarters so the fraud department could investigate his account. I then informed him that the claim had been opened, but since it was clear he was trying to exploit company policies, the claim had been flagged for review by the fraud department. I told him it was very likely his account would be terminated. His attitude shifted from entitled to panicked in seconds, and he asked me to close the claim. Unfortunately for him, I couldn't do that. He had demanded a claim, and now it was open. Yes, the customer's account was terminated. Story 2. In December 2020, during the height of the pandemic, I was working as a contractor in the role of a stress engineer, basically ensuring that things were structurally sound. About a week before Christmas, I received a call from the agency I was contracted through. They informed me that my contract was not going to be renewed. I live in the United Kingdom and had been working from home for roughly 6 months due to the lockdowns. I was part of a small team, and one particular member stood out for all the wrong reasons. He was quite self-absorbed, overly impressed with his intellect, and used complicated language to waffle in front of clients. To put it simply, he was a master at making things appear much better than they were. On the other hand, I preferred a more straightforward approach, sticking to facts when reporting the progress of my analysis. The project itself was a bit of a disaster. The client constantly changed their mind about how they wanted certain parts of the analysis done. As a contractor, I had to follow their directions, no matter how confusing or contradictory. I never really found out why it was me they chose to let go, but I have a pretty good guess. I believe that the constant changes and delays were pinned on me, and our resident weasel probably convinced them that he was far more valuable than I was. For some context, this guy was truly insufferable. I once had to check some of his analysis work. I did my job, found a few errors, corrected them, and sent the results back to him. He did not take it well, not one bit. Anyway, I corrected his work and even provided him with a simpler, more efficient way to do the same calculations. Instead of accepting my method, which was correct, he spent 2 entire days buried in a math textbook, trying to find a more complex matrix method that ultimately did the exact same thing. His obsession with overcomplicating things was baffling, especially considering we were contractors meant to get the job done efficiently. A few days later, during a coffee break, he proudly told me that he had submitted his calculations to the client and that they were really impressed with his matrix method. I was absolutely speechless. Internally, I thought, you didn't even come up with that method. You just read what others had done and took it to the next step. You didn't earn that knowledge yourself, so stop pretending it's your breakthrough. To sum him up, he was a weasel and a narcissist, always craving validation. He managed to stick around while I got let go. Then came another problematic character, our team leader, who wasn't much better. I won't delve too deeply into him, but let's just say he was just as difficult to deal with. Fast forward about 4 months after I was let go. By that time, I had been desperately looking for work. I'm married with 3 kids, and our savings were depleted. My eldest even dipped into his trust fund to help us get by. I ended up taking a job at a warehouse, working 12-hour shifts from Saturday to Monday, just so I could continue job hunting during the week. The work was tough, and the supervisor was not an easy person to deal with. One day, while sitting around, my phone rang. It was our lovely team leader out of the blue. "Hey, how's it going?" he asked. I could barely contain my frustration. "Hi," I replied, trying to sound polite. He continued, "Do you remember that analysis you did? Well, the client lost the files. Do you still have them?" It took everything in me not to explode in that moment. 4 months had passed with no word from this guy. He hadn't lifted a finger to help me find work. But now, out of nowhere, he needed my help. I replied. Yes, I think I do, but they're not the latest version. You'll need to double-check them for updates. He was elated. Oh great, if you could send them, that would be fantastic. I was in disbelief. The client lost the files. Well, that sounded like their problem, not mine. You might be wondering why I even bothered to give him the files. Well, here's the thing. I knew something that he didn't. The reason I had been able to summarize the analysis results so quickly was that I had written a script to comb through all the output files and extract only the relevant information. So, while I gave him the files, I made sure to give him 40 of them, outdated ones, at that. It would take him forever to manually sift through them and find what he needed. And as for that weasel, he can keep his inflated ego and convoluted methods. I'm just glad I'm not working with those people anymore. Story 3. So I have this family member who seems to think everyone owes her because family. She moved here with her husband and kids to be close to their parents and proceeded to get butthurt because their parents didn't devote all their time to her and her kids, and worse still, didn't spend all their money showering the kids with gifts. My husband and I have recently built a house, and it was finally finished in time for us to move in before Christmas. I have a lot of children. Some are adults and have moved out of the family home. The only thing I wanted for Christmas was to spend our first Christmas in our new home with all of our children together for the first time in years. They always come and visit around this time of year, but with spouses, work, and other obligations, we haven't been all together at the same time for years, and especially not on Christmas Day. But this year my wish was granted, and I was Buddy the Elf excited for Christmas this year. Last Christmas, entitled family member fed me a sob story about how they have no one and Christmas will be just horrible, so I told her they could join us if they wanted to, which they did. They proceeded to drink all the cocktails within mins, just slamming them down one after the other. Sat around complaining about the heat, complaining about other family members. Ate, then left. I didn't really mind. If I'm honest, I had a migraine and was cooking in 40 degrees heat, so I didn't really have the capacity to care. I had been talking about my plans for Christmas this year for months, moving into the house and having all my kids home. Entitled family member had plans of their own. They were all heading out of town and visiting other family members over Christmas. All is well, no issues, no problems. Well, if that were the case, I wouldn't be here now, would I? Christmas Day rolls around, and as planned, I had all my kids home. All the adult kids' significant others. It was a fantastic day. After Christmas dinner, I got a text message saying we're no longer family. Obviously, I reply with "what the F?" and get a response saying we're not family anymore. She's done. Insert threats of self-harm and hopes I have an amazing life. I had absolutely no idea where all this was coming from, but I guess in the warped mindset that is entitlement, it all made sense to her. After a lot of back and forth trying to figure out what the problem was, turns out their Christmas plans fell through, and they had to come home before Christmas. Apparently, I'm a massive H because I don't spend all my time stalking people on social media, and therefore didn't know they had returned home. I'm an even bigger H because I didn't invite them to my house for Christmas Day. I'd been very clear in the lead up to Christmas. I know the entitlement runs deep with this one, and had said multiple times that Christmas was the first Christmas in my new home and was being spent with all my children. No one else. No extended family. No friends. Just me, hubby, our kids, and partners. At one point, after asking what the problem was and getting no closer to an answer, I came straight out and said, "Is this all really over the fact I spent this Christmas with my kids and didn't invite you and your family this year?" Turns out that's exactly what the problem was. They'd had to come back home for whatever reason. She's ostracized herself and her family from the rest of the extended family, so they spent their Christmas in their own home with just her hubby and kids, while I was making the most of my day with my hubby and my kids, and it hurt her feelings that my adult children had their long-term partners here as well. Apparently my kids' partners aren't family, because being in serious monogamous relationships for years means nothing, and she's blood, so she should have been invited. Am I missing something here? Where in the family rule book does it say I have to invite every man and his dog to my home for every special occasion? Where does it say everyone else's happiness is my responsibility? How do seemingly normal people build a mindset of the whole world owes me? Story 4. To start, some backstory. This happened many years ago, when I was 11 or 12. Back then, I had a whole gang of friends in the neighborhood, with whom I would play outside whenever we could. Most of the members were slightly younger than me, but the younger sister of one of my friends was also present, which we were fine with, and we all considered her our younger sister, as we had all been playing outside together for most of our lives. She had a cat important. There was also a child about the same age as me, who we used to play with, but didn't anymore, as he was very short-tempered in general, started fights a lot, tried to threaten us with his air rifle, and had a jerk of a mother who would always stick up for him. He still lived in the same neighborhood as us, however, and also knew what time we would go outside to play. This fact will be important later on. It started when my whole gang and I decided to go to a nearby park, about a 10-minute walk away. We were aware of the fact that the entitled Brat EB was there with his mother, but we just resolved to keep our distance and not let him provoke us. When we were almost at the park, I could hear a faint bang sound, but thought nothing of it. We had just climbed up the stairs to the park. It was on a hill, and we saw something that would horrify all of us. The child had my friend's younger sister's cat in its kennel. He had set it down about 20 feet away from him, and he was taking potshots at the kennel with his air rifle. Even worse, you could hear the poor cat's cries from where we were standing, about 10 feet away. What was the mother doing, you ask? Good question. She was sitting about 40 feet away, in full view of us, on her phone, not even raising her head. Given the title, I think what happens next is pretty self-explanatory. Before I get to it, I want to clarify that EB was relatively big for his age 11 and weighed, at a guess, 100-ish pounds, or about 45 kilograms. However, I was and still am a judoka, which means that I practice the martial art of judo, with a blue belt, so please don't think this is made up. I immediately rushed him, and I didn't want to try to fight him while he had his air rifle, so I disarmed him and threw the rifle to the side, then threw him down. He, being the EB that he was, started screaming for his mother while I had him in one of the least dangerous hold-downs in judo. The mother, unsurprisingly, sprang towards me, screaming bloody murder. I pulled Eb to his feet after he said, "Okay, please stop. I give up, hoping to explain to EM that he was shooting at the poor cat, but he immediately attacked me again. This time I wasn't having any of his nonsense. I punched him repeatedly, and after he kicked me between my legs and reached for the air rifle, which my friend was holding, I held him in a chokehold without actually choking him, and put my knee into his back, which is a hold that is almost impossible to escape from. Mind you, this whole time EM was screaming that she was going to kill me and was going to call the cops because I had stolen her child's air rifle, tried to kill him, and used it on that cat. You're a menace to society, but seemed very unwilling to step in to help her, precious darling asterisk. I asked her what her evidence against me was, and she replied with, well, I know people at the police department, okay. To be honest, I was getting scared at this point, remember. I was just a kid, okay? I let the kid up, but still didn't give the air rifle back. I still found the courage to ask her how she was going to beat my evidence about animal abuse, as all of my friends could provide proof. It was at this point that she messed up. She slapped me. I obviously didn't attack EM back, but instead we did the slightly cowardly, but now, what seems like the right thing, we all just grabbed the cat and started running back to my house. However, we didn't even get out of the park, as a couple of my friends had run back to my house already and told my parents. They showed up right there and there was a 15-minute argument, which ended in my parents storming off to the car, taking a lot of photos of my cheek, dropping me off at my house after showing me where the first aid kit was, and presumably going to press charges. The best thing about her slapping me, by the way, proof. The slap didn't hurt that much, but she had broken the skin on my cheek and scratched it with her long nails, and there was a ton of blood. To cut an already long story short, she was taken to the police and my parents filed charges. And the moment you've all been waiting for. The cat was okay. She had been hit with a pellet but survived, as she was taken to the animal hospital right away, and her leg didn't even need to be amputated. She died a year ago, unfortunately, but she was happy up to her death and didn't suffer. Story 5. So this is what I was hearing off of my brother's call with his boyfriend. Me and my brother share a room. So to set the story, there was a pretty bad snowstorm that happened me a 15M, and my brother an 18M live in Scotland, while my brother's boyfriend a 23M lives in England. This story's about my brother's boyfriend. I'm just gonna say it, his parents are pieces of crap. Some stories I've heard about his mum was that she made him pay rent as a teenager under her roof. I don't really know much about his stepdad, but from what I've heard through my brother's phone, he's garbage. His parents left the cat outside for 3 days in the freezing cold and didn't let him in even for food. When my brother's boyfriend saw his cat, he found the cat looking like it couldn't even breathe. The cat had peed on itself, and the cat couldn't even move. I'm pretty sure he said the cat was either limping or flopping. When my brother's boyfriend heard about what happened with the cat, he burst into tears because he's had the cat for 12 years. He started asking his mum why she didn't take the cat to the vet on Thursday, and I don't think she replied. So they take the cat to the vet today, and the vets say her referring to the cat temperature is below the average for a cat. It's supposed to be 36 degrees Celsius, and it came out as 34 degrees Celsius. But apart from they said the cat is fine, just it's freezing, and couldn't move. The vet then said there were 3 options to what they could do. Put the cat in an incubator and hope it survives. I'm pretty sure it had something to do with tests. Put the cat down. His stepdad without hesitation said to put her down because he referring to the stepdad hates cats and just said, it's a cat, her time has come. If that's the case, why live with a person who has a cat in their house? So they had the cat put down and cremated. My brother's boyfriend was obviously devastated about this. My brother's boyfriend said he wants to keep the cat's ashes when he can get them, saying he doesn't want to scatter them in some random pet cemetery. His stepdad said, that decision is up to your mum to decide, and so my brother's boyfriend insisted they keep the cat's ashes, and so his mum said they're keeping the ashes. Then not even an hour after the cat got put down, his stepdad started getting rid of the cat's things, and my brother's boyfriend has been crying all day, and I don't blame him. I'm pretty sure he said his stepdad is allergic to cats, but even then buy allergy meds or leave. My brother said that if he could, he was going to go and message both of his referring to his boyfriend parents and talk about what pieces of crap they are. So I'm doing this to do a task that he isn't able to do. Story 6. Me, M24, and my soon-to-be fiancé, F23, have been dating for about 5 years. She is smart, beautiful, and the light of my life. Love her to death. Like any healthy and happy couple, we have our fair share of joke arguments here and there. Maybe a minor serious argument once every blue moon. However, when it comes to her parents, they are a complete nightmare to deal with, and it is reaching a breaking point between us. Some background. We met in college, and I got to meet her folks after our second date, who seemed normal enough. She was adopted by her grandparents for reasons that don't need to be disclosed here other than the fact their daughter and her husband were very abusive towards her, and she needed therapy all throughout childhood because of sexual abuse. Now it seems because of her grandparents, will refer to them as parents for simplicity here on out, she wants to go back to therapy, and I support her 100%. Trouble started showing during COVID. My fiancé works in the medical field and has a good head on her shoulders, so she kept up with developing news about it. Her parents, however, are Trump nuts, no other way to put it. They think he was, and still is, the smartest and greatest man to ever live, and anyone who disagrees is just a hater and not a real Christian. Personally, I could give two shits about anyone's opinion on COVID or politics. However, the first major red flag was on Election Day 2020. I was watching the news in the living room with her mother, and a couple of minorities, sorry if this is improper, came on the TV to give their opinion. Well, her mother proudly proclaimed, "Those people shouldn't even be allowed to vote." Taken aback, I asked what she meant by that, seeing that they were Trump nuts and the people on the TV were talking about voting Democrat. I thought she meant political affiliation. But no, she meant because they weren't white. To this day, they constantly say, "those people," when referring to any minority who is anything but pure white. Then about a year or so into the relationship, my fiancée started opening up more as she has trust issues because of her parents, like how they removed her bedroom door just before she became a teenager or forced her to break up with her first serious BF after getting out of an abusive relationship just because they had sex. And although it wasn't mentioned, me and my fiancé both agree, it was probably more so forced because it was a black man. Then she told me about how her mother comments about her weight and constantly makes her feel bad about herself and her body. Now I do want to mention here before going any further that her mother is dying. I feel for my fiancé. I want to be there to support her in any way possible, especially for when her mother passes. However, everything becomes a competition with her. Have a broken leg. Well, didn't you know I'm dying? That's so much worse. She likes to control the room and talk over anyone and everyone to the point where no one can get a word in edgewise. Essentially, talking to her is just listening to her have a conversation about herself. And I feel as though this just fed into my fiancé, never feeling heard by her parents. Her mother loves telling long stories, most of which she tells over and over again, which normally wouldn't be an issue. When my fiancé tries to tell her she heard the story before, her mother will flip her lid. She will scream at her, demanding she gets to finish her story, and will often do it over the phone. This will make my fiancé very upset and often spend very long periods of time on the phone with her, which she doesn't like to do. Her mother is less so the problem. In fact, I would that she should stay close to her mother despite everything I previously stated if her father is cut off. Her father, however, might be one of the worst people I have ever had the displeasure of interacting with. Again, much like her mother, red flags didn't appear until about a year into dating, but her father was so much worse than I ever could have feared. He will guilt trip, gaslight, and use anything to his advantage to get his way. Her mother always defends his manipulative actions, to which my fiancé has just learned to put up with it. Because of this, he has always kept me on edge, and I always got a bad vibe from him, and always felt like he never liked me. I come from a fairly well-off family, and because of that I feel like he resents me for it. My breaking point was when I was still in college. At the time I was in the social studies education program, on track to become a teacher. One time when we were visiting, making a pit stop at their house before driving to my parents for Thanksgiving, he waits until my fiancé is out of the room and makes a joke. "Hey, if you're becoming a teacher, make sure you don't become trans, then try to rape the kids into thinking they are gay." Now, as a person who is bisexual, this completely threw me off. I didn't even know what to say, or if I should even tell my fiancé what happened out of fear that she wouldn't believe me. I waited a whole week after that incident to tell her what happened and that I was done speaking to him or ever being alone with him in a room again. She believed me immediately, but just responded with, "That's just how he is." From that point on, I had no idea how to even speak to them at that point, and refused to even go with her to visit when they demanded she dog sat for them while they were out of town to get her mother treatment, despite her being extremely busy with college. But since they loved to guilt trip, she often gave in. This continued until I graduated college and my fiancé had a year left, so I helped her move into her new apartment with her father. I stayed civil and so did he. My fiancé even said he wanted to apologize about the joke, which of course he didn't, and when I brought it up with her, she said that he told her that he did apologize, just straight up lied. Maybe I was out of earshot, but an actual apology, I believe you would want to at least have the person's full attention. Then last November she got an exciting opportunity to interview at the Mayo Clinic in MN, which she got the job before graduation. We were extremely excited. My parents were so proud of her, and helped us in every way they could with the move, and constantly told her how impressive the accomplishment was. Her parents were not very happy. Before stating this, I want to let you know this is my personal opinion. Her parents always seemed like they wanted her to stay home and take care of her mother. They always said college was a waste of time and turned people away from God and made them liberals. Seeing that she worked as an CNA in high school, she had some experience working with the sick and elderly. Every time she went home, they would just make her run errands while they both sat at home and did nothing. At her own graduation party, my mother expressed her happiness that my fiancé got this job opportunity and we were moving. Dad just grunted and said, "We'll see how long it lasts." I should state her mother expressed happiness as well for the opportunity for her speech at said party, while her father looked miserable. Then the day of the move came and both families were helping us pack up to move across the country. However, while inside her parents' house to use the bathroom, her father pulled me aside and said to me, "You better keep her on a tighter leash than the one you have her on now." I am not a violent person, but I swear I was very close to breaking his nose. I cannot even begin to wonder what kind of person can talk about their daughter in such a way. That's when this thought of limiting contact really began to fester. I also want to preface a few more things quickly. Both of their biological children want nothing to do with them. They don't talk to them only because I can imagine her parents treated them the same way they treat my fiancé. They are religious to a ridiculous degree where they think all science is fake, and even once said that if my fiancé needed a new heart at birth to live, they would have let her die. The church they go to is a cult where the pastor makes political remarks constantly. When we moved out here, they told my fiancé they hope she failed, and we break up because we were spitting in God's face by moving in together by not being married. Both of my parents are religious, and both of us have no issues with them. They are also Republican, but are free enough thinkers that they don't blindly vote on election day. They have been nothing but supportive of me and my fiancé, who they adore. They are aware of the situation and try to reach out to my fiancé for support whenever they can. My mother has been a rock for her, and I'm thankful they are understanding through this whole situation. Present. Now we are living in Minnesota, states away from them, and they constantly call my fiancé and text her for things they could probably Google, like where to find dog toys or other silly things. I can only assume because they don't want to lose another kid who is still willing to talk to them. Her father will make snide remarks on the phone or through texts such as, "We still love you. We haven't taken you off the will yet," or, "I guess you don't love us enough to care to even call," despite her starting her new job and being very busy the first few months after the move. My parents, other family, friends, and myself are very concerned about her mental health when it comes to her parents. She is stressed at work, and her parents certainly can't be helping with that. A few weeks ago, she flew home for a bridal shower of which she is the maid of honor. Well, her parents made that weekend hell on earth. It became her breaking point. They brought up politics in the middle of a restaurant dinner with my fiancé, and she said her opinion on abortion. Her mother started wailing and crying, making a scene in the restaurant. Anytime she was home, they got into a screaming match because they didn't like that she was forming her own opinions. Her father walked out, and her mother started crying, claiming that he was suicidal and mentally unwell and seeing a therapist, to which me and my fiancé both thought was a lie, until we realized the only person who goes into their house is their pastor, the very same who wished that my fiancé failed at her dream job, so they considered him a therapist. Her father almost never leaves the house unless it's getting groceries because all of his time is spent taking care of her mother. Every time she called me, she sounded miserable. She told her best friend, who's getting married at her bridal shower, that she didn't even want to go home and see them. To top it all off, my fiancé had multiple mental breakdowns in that single weekend. Now, after that weekend, I started bringing up the possibility of lessening the amount of contact she has with them. I know I'm not a perfect person, and I like to think myself as somewhat reasonable. I want her to have a good relationship with her parents. But after everything they've done, and every time she goes home and has a new story to tell me about what they've said or done to her, I see that as less and less of a possibility. At first, I said, maybe don't talk to them for a week, And if you feel better, or they don't improve, make it a month or a year. I understand since her mother is dying, she doesn't want to completely cut them off and regret not speaking to her more before dying. I would never be able to forgive myself if that were to happen, and she would understandably hate me for it. It has gotten to the point where even my own mother thinks it's for the best. And being raised as an Italian Catholic, nothing is more important than family to her. Before flying out for the actual wedding, the bridal shower was for I lost sleep and started losing some hair from the amount of stress of having to see her parents again. I know she was just as worried as well and did everything I could to support her. I had no idea what they would do or say to possibly ruin what should be a celebratory weekend with her and her best friend getting married. I love my fiancée. She is the most amazing person in the world, and I'm so proud of her for getting her dream job at one of the world's best hospitals. I just don't know what I can do to help anymore. I want to help her, and I'm hoping other people here who have gone through something similar can give some advice, words of encouragement, or something to help her. If you read all of that insanity, thank you.